But we begin tonight with a dictator's fears. The body of Alexei Navalny is still being held hostage by the Russian penal system because even in death, Vladimir Putin is afraid of him. Members of Navalny's team have said that Russian authorities claim the cause of Navalny's death is still unknown, and they have refused to release his body for the next 2 weeks as a preliminary inquest continues. Navalny's mother has been standing outside the penal colony pleading directly to Putin for the return of her son's remains. Shortly after her appeal, police announced a new criminal case against Alexei Navalny's younger brother, Oleg. On Monday, Navalny's widow, Yulia, created a Twitter account and accused Putin of a cover-up. Elon Musk's ex suspended the account briefly for spam or abuse. And you should know that holding a body hostage isn't new for Vladimir Putin. Shortly after FSB agents poisoned Navalny with a nerve agent back in 2020, doctors refused to release him to a German hospital until the poison had time to work its way out of his system. Navalny survived that murder attempt, but unfortunately, Putin persisted, and he got his way this time. And Alexei Navalny wasn't the only man Putin likely had murdered last week. The body of a Russian military pilot who defected from Russia by flying a military helicopter into Ukraine was found riddled with bullets and run over by a car in Spain. He is dead, likely because he dared to vocally oppose Russia's war in Ukraine. These murders are yet another reminder of the unadulterated brutality of the Putin regime, which Navalny was far too familiar with. And while he had made it his life's work to stand up to Putin's violence and evil, Navalny, in the final weeks of his life, had warned of another threat, another evil: Donald Trump. According to the New York Times, Navalny wrote to a friend recently that Trump's agenda for a second term as the American president looked, quote, really scary. After Navalny's death, Trump dared to compare himself to the martyred opposition leader, claiming that stealing classified material, trying to nullify the votes of 81 million Americans, and vowing to shoot people who object to his policies was tantamount to Navalny's quest to bring freedom of speech and democracy to Russia. Mind you, Trump has never put himself in grave danger. He is a physical coward who, when called upon by his country to serve during the Vietnam War, declined because his feet hurt. And while America's former coward-in-chief putts away on a golf course between court hearings while comparing himself to Navalny, the reality is much more apparent. Trump is America's Putin, so much so that he had his lawyer argue that as president, he could order SEAL Team 6, one of America's most elite military institutions, to murder his political opponents, which is literally what Putin seems to have just done to Alexei Navalny. The similarities don't end there. Putin and Trump both want to twist their countries into the same awful thing: a Christian nationalist state. According to Politico, yet another think tank close to Trump is working on plans to make that happen if he returns to the White House. Politico obtained documents showing that, according to the Center for Renewing America, led by a right-wing extremist named Russell Vought, Trump's former OMB director, Christian nationalism is a top priority, along with invoking the Insurrection Act on day one to quash protests and refusing to spend authorized congressional funds on unwanted projects. Thanks to reporting from Politico, the New York Times, and Axios, we now know that CRA and Project 25 have a long list of plans for America on day one of a second Trump administration, including mass deportations, shooting migrants at the border, full immunity for police to kill at will, gutting the EPA, terminating the Constitution, bombing Mexico, exiting NATO, banning Muslims from entering the country, imposing ideological screenings for immigrants, revoking student visas of those who protest on college campuses against Israel. He also wants to dismantle the Department of Education, enforce Florida-style patriotic education in our schools, end federal funding of any schools that mention so-called critical race theory, gender ideology, or what people like Stephen Miller determine to be inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content. They intend to force children to learn about their version of the nuclear family, including the roles of mothers and fathers and things that make men and women different and unique. That's what our kids will learn in Trump's Christian nationalist public schools, while corporations and America's wealthiest men, like Jamie Dimon, Elon Musk, and every other rich celebrity supporting Trump, get yet another giant tax cut. Or maybe they just cease to pay any taxes at all. And I didn't even get to the national abortion ban Trump is planning and the further plans of the right-wing majority on the Supreme Court. The conservative majority on the court, led by Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, have already waged a full frontal assault on modern society, including repealing the civil rights era, abortion access, and affirmative action. And they are currently gunning for contraceptive access and maybe even gay marriage. And that is because justices like Alito and Thomas share the religious far right's grievances about society's evolution. Alito once complained that in certain quarters, religious liberty is fast becoming a disfavored right, while the ultimate second-tier constitutional right in the minds of some is the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. Why would he care about actual second-class citizens like women, the poor, black and brown people, or gays, lesbians, and trans people? Alito and Trump are joined by House Speaker Mike Johnson, who, according to one MSNBC columnist, is the most unabashedly Christian nationalist speaker in U.S. history, which means he, too, wants to basically eviscerate the separation between church and state. He once called homosexuality an inherently unnatural and dangerous lifestyle. Now, if all of this sounds like The Handmaid's Tale, congratulations, you get it. Yesterday, Mike Johnson made his maiden pilgrimage as Speaker to Mar-a-Lago to pledge his allegiance not to the Constitution, but to Donald Trump, on the same day that Trump was voted by historians as the worst president in U.S. history. Joining me now is Eugene Robinson, Washington Post columnist and MSNBC political analyst, and Stephen Levitsky, professor of government at Harvard University and co-author of How Democracies Die. His latest book is Tyranny of the Minority. Thank you both for being here. Eugene, I do want to start with you. You have been an international reporter. You have reported on other countries, including autocracies. How close do you feel ours is coming to those?
Ours, too close for comfort, to tell you the truth, Joy. And the thing is that, let's imagine for a second that Donald Trump gets elected president again and does half of the things that he says he's going to do. Once, 4 years, we'll survive the 4 years somehow. We'll fight tooth and nail everything bad that he's trying to do. But in the end, when you lose these norms, when you lose that basic principle of the separation of church and state, for example, when you lose respect for the independent justice system, it's very hard to get those things back. And I watched countries in South America that had undergone years of autocracy trying to get their democratic norms back. And it's really difficult. It's easy to lose them, hard to get them back.
Yeah. And here's how it begins, Stephen Levitsky. It begins with cowards. Not just Trump, who's a physical coward and tries to compare himself to a very brave man, the late Mr. Navalny, but also people like Tim Scott. Because Tim Scott is vowing to say that it wouldn't be 4 years, that if he were somehow made vice president, which he's desperate to be, he would do what Mike Pence would not. Here is Tim Scott.
I'm not going to answer hypothetical questions, number one. And you voted to certify the election results in the Senate in the first Republican debate last year. Did. You said Vice President Pence, quote, absolutely did the right thing. That's still your view, though, yes? I have not changed my view. Here's the question. You're asking a hypothetical question that you know can never happen again.
They're all Tim Scott, Stephen. All of the Republicans elected right now in Congress, House, and Senate, they would all concede and allow Donald Trump to stay in office. How would they ever get him to leave? Because they wouldn't even try, clearly.
This is what keeps me up at night, Joy. A single leader, even somebody like Donald Trump, cannot kill democracy on his own. He needs accomplices. And it's mainstream politicians who serve as those accomplices. The fact that the Republican Party leadership, all of it at this point, has made it abundantly clear that they will condone, they will tolerate, they will accept, they will go along with virtually all of Trump's authoritarian shenanigans which is very different from the Republican Party even a decade ago. All of the critics, even the few people who stood up to Donald Trump during his first term have been run out of the Republican Party. And so now the entire party is saying that it is willing to back Trump, even if he's convicted of having tried to overturn an election. It's not just Trump. The entire Republican Party has turned away from democracy.